In the age of information, ignorance is but a choice. For ignorance and negligence will be Rawhead's greatest advantage in achieving his conquest. It is now known that the barbarians are not aware of the war that is yet to come. They are afraid. Every man will be slaughtered. The women will be raped and die from bursting bellies, and all the children will be devoured. Very soon, Rawhead will burn this village to the ground and once again reclaim what is rightfully his. His land, his kingdom. You must understand, my friends, this demigod, force of human nature that is a horror from a different time, now resides within a strange world with machinery and technology. The barbarians have weakened with time, their courage diminished, and crippled with fear. God, how they fear Rawhead and all his glorious might. Since his escape from the earthly prison, Rawhead found no evidence of these mights having any knowledge of the power that defeated him, the same power that confined them deep underground. And after days of studying this new world and its ways, and baptizing the holy man and destroying the one place that reeked with the power, Rawhead was fully convinced that these humans had forgotten his conquest and the power that defeated him. These filthy mites, so ignorant, so negligent. And as Rawhead drew a kidney from the meat dish beside him, tasting the delicious child flesh and thick blood from his long fingers, Rawhead's long, pale new body stretched out in the harvest fields, bathing in the moonlight glow. A king indulging his feast before the war. Rawhead had seen enough of this world and his people, for on this night, Rawhead will have his throne of bodies, the grounds drenched with blood, and a conquest that will never be forgotten. Humanity will weep, scream for their king, because of how they chose to die like ignorant cowards. Ron Milton did not know what to make of the scene within the church. Everything within this holy building was vandalized, desecrated, and destroyed. In the midst of the chaos was a naked man standing over a bonfire of torn pews, chairs, and ripped Bibles. Ron could obviously see that there was a deranged madness to this. Was this part of Ron's journey against evil, or something that was standing between him and his goals? A brief moment of debating with this man. Obviously, this man was unwilling to reason with his surroundings, nor his sanity. Something about this was not right. Immediately, Declan knew the intentions of this man. He reeked of Reverend Coots, for he came to destroy his master. Yes, anyone can come into a church, but not tonight. So he says he came on behalf of the old Winker, who probably died in his own piss and blood by now. Came to have himself a look at the altar, chasing this fabled idea that he could destroy God. This church is a lie. Rawhead is God. And Declan will not let this man anywhere near the altar. Ron hadn't anticipated a confrontation with Declan, not with a madman who was willing to give his life for that monster. First, a 9-foot devil that devoured his son, and now getting into a physical altercation with this unhinged psychopath. Regardless of his rage, his determination to conquer this beast, Ron was still adjusting to what was unfolding. He was still unprepared for this battle against the devil. And just as Declan had Ron overpowered, that was when a flashing light splashed through the west window, followed with a cloud of screams, for his lord has come to take back what is rightfully his. Except Declan's distraction was long enough for Ron to regain himself and overpower Declan. Confusion turning into a fury that was being unleashed upon the sick-minded man who was stupid enough to stand in his way, not caring for Declan's story nor why he would give worship to that beast. In fact, Ron had no feelings, no care for anything. For his strikes upon Declan's face was only a natural reaction of his rage, which didn't stop until his knuckles bled and Declan fell to his knees. Outside, Zeal was ablaze. Rawhead running through the streets slaughtering any citizens that cross its path, attacking all the vehicles. It was clear that he was making them explode, so that Zil will burn from end to end, flanking the streets with fire and pouring with blood. Oblivious to Rawhead's chaotic symphony outside the church, Ron stood over the altar, his attention now focused on this strange experience coursing through his body. A sudden erection, a driving hard-on as Ron's hand neared the wooden altar, and the immense shock that ran from his body down to his legs as he touched the altar. The erection throbbed, balls tingled. Ron grabbed an object. He was not going to let a supernatural experience stop him from achieving his goals. Smashing the aged wood with all his strength, small waves of electrical force striking his body was not going to stop him. Ron's determination was finally rewarded with a hollow altar. Empty. It was empty, except a ball of stone. Outside was Rawhead's jubilation, the screams, the explosions, and for half of the day, Ron Milton trusted God, only to find himself going against this monster with a stone. Just a fucking stone. Was it meant to be something, perhaps? Something with a deeper significance? Ron's attention was suddenly directed to a knot of noise at the other end of the church. The police officer from earlier, who didn't believe in Satan, and now believes in hell. Zil is in flames. Its people are dying out there. May Christ help us. Of course, there is no fucking Christ. Only Rawhead. But next to the officer was a familiar woman, Mrs. Blatter, the woman from the hotel, who didn't seem to know where she was, nor that she was nude. Ron wasn't sure if she was a hallucination or not, but there was something about Mrs. Blatter's bloated form that Ron found entrancing. How she was terribly overweight, her breasts sagging, her belly overshadowing the cunt. It was doubtful if she could even see it. It was that throbbing erection in Ron's pants that made him realize that it was her image he was holding in his hands. A woman. This was no stone, but a statue of a woman. A Venus grosser than Mrs. Blatter, her belly swelling with children and tits like mountains. All this time, these people have been giving worship to a goddess, and Ron holding the Venus tightly in his hands. Declan's screeching cries to warn his master as Ron began making his way outside into the inferno. God, goddess, doesn't matter. For Ron Milton knows what must be done. He's going to kill that fucking devil. And there it was, a silhouette against a panorama of flames. The devil that took his son. Maybe it was Declan's cries that caught Rawhead's attention, or maybe because he knew. Rawhead knew without being told that the woman had been found. And as Rawhead began making his way towards Ron Milton, the final thing that stood between Rawhead and his victory. You cannot imagine the fear building up within Ron when gazing upon Rawhead's form. The doubt within him as the creature came closer, not showing any care for the weapon in his hands. Why is it not showing any fear? Why is it not afraid? Unless Coot had been wrong. That this is just a stone in Ron's hands. Just a useless lump of stone. A superstition. Ron didn't even hear Declan when he was struck from behind and pushed towards the beast. Oh, but Rawhead had no intentions of wanting the brave and foolish father. It wanted his loyal servant. It wanted Declan. The beast had been careless and over-enthusiastic during its reign of terror in Zil, showing no care for the fire that damaged his face and body, his crisp body, and tearing Declan's body into two and disposing his remains like the pieces of useless trash. For Ron was to be next. And it is true, my friends. Ron was carrying nothing but a superstition. Ron Milton had no power. and yet he still found the courage to stand his ground and be seen. If he dies, then he dies. And the monster, finally seeing the image in Ron's hands, that immense ache in his mind, how it pricked him, teased him. Rawhead trying to tell himself that it was just a symbol, not the power itself. It's just a piece of stone, and yet the stone itself is of the very thing he feared the most. The bleeding woman, her gaping hole, eating seed and spewing children. It was life. That hole, that woman, and God, how it terrified him. Rawhead was afraid, and Ron could see this within the monster. Now it was Ron who was moving towards Rawhead, and the villagers, who gathered the courage to come from hiding. Slowly they began surrounding Rawhead. A monster of greatness? A king of men? Is but a fearful, pathetic animal with shit coming down his leg. And just as Ron and the villagers began closing in on Rawhead, it was for a moment when Rawhead found the courage to overcome his superstitious fear when striking Ron across the head. A brief moment before Rawhead felt the knife going into him, and even though Rawhead tried fighting back against the assault, snapping a finger, a slash across a face, Rawhead was succumbing to the swarm of human hands and weapons. These villagers had now lost their fear, for their hatred was ancient and familiar, how they never knew, how it was in their blood and bone this entire time. Eventually, Rawhead's thrashing fell to the violent assault. He knew that death was coming. There was not going to be a resurrection, no underground prison. Rawhead had lost his power, and he was helpless. And the last thing Rawhead's beady eyes saw was Ron standing over him. The fury in his eyes as he held the woman above him, before everything went dark. And just like that, it was all over. There was no celebration, no ceremony, no cries. The king was dead. After the flames died, the villagers went on with their miserable lives. Ron Milton left the Venus buried in Rawhead's face. He had no care for the stone nor its current whereabouts. He shared no stories of his victory in Zil. He left that village, having no care for Zil, its history, nor Rawhead. Ron Milton had no care for gods and goddesses. And it went unnoticed. But in death, there was a stream of urine that pulsed from Rawhead's corpse and ran down the road, making its way to a gutter, running along the crack in the tarmac, and drained off into the welcoming earth.
those who dream by night in the dusty recesses of their minds wake in the day to find that it was vanity. But the dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they may act their dream with open eyes to make it possible. This